immensely complicated conflict which involves many countries besides North and South Korea. Starting with just two countries in a single conflict, the Korean conflict has now developed into a world problem that many countries are hoping will be solved. Basically, this conflict is an issue of nuclear power and the way a government should be ruled. It began after World War II and is still a major conflict today. Part of the reason why this conflict is still going on is the lack of cooperation and reasoning on both sides. Now let's talk about the 6 stages of the Korean conflict. Step 1. The beginning. As stated before, the Korean conflict began after the Second World War when U.S. troops occupied the South and Soviet troops occupied the North. This was back when Korea was still a unified country. Russia and the USA have always had very contrasting political views that they have wanted to spread worldwide, so eventually North Korea created a Soviet-backed leadership which angered the Americans who did not want South Korea to join North Korea in communism. Tensions rose as Russians were kicked out of their territory and North Korea continued to build up and run the communistic government. Step 2. Early growth. The South, with the help of the U.S. troops, declared independence from the North. The South originally did not want to split from the North, but their alliance with the United States of America would suffer if they didn't, triggering the North to attack. This was the beginning of the Korean War. Step 3. Deadlock. Although the Korean War was only 3 years long, it was a violent and bloody battle which cost Korea as a whole over 2 million lives. The war ended in 1953 with a truce rather than a peace treaty, meaning that the war had not officially ended. This created a lot of tension on both sides. A few years later, North Korea began building nuclear weapons, claiming it was just for self-defense if the United States or South Korea planned a surprise attack. It also asked the UN for clearance to test their nuclear weapons, making the United States very anxious. The USA then asked the UN to send an organization to inspect these nuclear weapons. At first, North Korea was on board with the inspections, but as the years evolved, they began to deny access into Pyongyang, the city where these weapons were being produced. As you can see, tensions between these 3 countries are very high and stressful. The fact that the war is not over could mean that any country could attack at any moment and the war would start up again. North Korea needs to look for a way out, or at least try to talk to the other 2 nations. Tensions were so high for this reason, and Kim Jong-il, North Korea's president, wanted to build nuclear weapons in case South Korea or the United States decided to surprise attack. Nuclear weapons began to be built, causing the United States to become very nervous and wanting inspections to be held to figure out what exactly was going on. However, North Korea slowly began to refuse inspections and beginning to test their nuclear weapons. South Korea anxiously keeps a close watch on what is going on. In 1968, the early stage of the conflict, North Korea unsuccessfully attempted to assassinate the president of South Korea. In 1987, North Korea was accused of bombing a South Korean airplane. After these and other attacks, South Korea has been practicing military drills, and in June 2002, a gun battle in the Yellow Sea occurred, killing around 30 North and South Koreans. 1 year later, in August 2003, the conflict had heavily evolved. North Korea was creating nuclear bombs to be prepared in case South Korea and the U.S. attack. An attempt of cooperation was finally made in October of 2007, where presidents from the North and South pledged that they will talk and at least try to formally end the Korean conflict. Tensions subside and things are looking up for this long conflict to finally have an end. However, in November of 2008, just a year after both presidents met unsuccessfully, North Korea accuses South Korea of pursuing a confrontational policy and neglects all political and military deals with the South, causing tensions to skyrocket once more. The war still has not been formally ended. Two years later, in 2010, a South Korean warship had been sunk on March 26th. South Korea claimed that North Korea had sunk the ship purposely. However, North Korea denied this, and tensions have been high ever since. To stop this kind of fighting that has repeatedly occurred throughout the past 60 years, because each nation is continually trying to unify the peninsula with its own form of government, North Korea issued a proposal to the U.S. to formally talk in 2013 and try to sort out the 3-way conflict. Step 4. Looking for a way out. As mentioned, in early 2013, North Korea surprisingly made an offer to the USA to talk about their problems. It might seem interesting that they chose the US rather than South Korea, but remembering that the US troops occupied South Korea at the time of the war, it seems like a good idea. Step 5. Setting the dispute or resolving the conflict. North Korea has one condition, and that is that it will not give up its nuclear weapons unless the USA do the same, making it difficult for the Americans to accept this offer. The USA would also like to talk but does not want to give up its nuclear assets. Later that year, North Korea proposed to finally sign a peace treaty with the US and South Korea, but the US refused in fear that when things are over, South Korea will join North Korea and become a communist country. Then North Korea proposed that the countries stay separate, but the North remains socialist and the South remains capitalist. The USA refuses once more. As the conflict evolved, South Korea asked for help from the United Nations, and the US came to the South Koreans' aid. Overall, 16 nations helped the South Koreans, whereas North Korea only received help from the Soviet Union, Moscow, Pakistan, and China, and sometimes limited help from other nations. The conflict has been ongoing, and different nations have offered to help and support what they believe is right. When concerning culture and how this influences the interpretation, North and South Korea do not show cooperation. Of course, South Korea thinks that North should agree to establish a democracy. However, North Korea thinks that they should establish a communist country. The United States are on the South Korean side and the supporters of North Korea on their side. It is different points of view on this conflict and sometimes even propaganda that influence the opinions of the people, outside nations, and the country itself. This is one of the reasons why the conflict has been ongoing for so long. Neither side of the country can cooperate with each other, causing more conflict as seen over the last few years. Although this conflict still hasn't seen an end, the three countries are technically still at war. But we believe that soon things will quiet down due to the fact that North Korea does not want war with the United States and is trying to compromise and make proposals to formally end the Korean War and the problems it brought with it. Hopefully, the United States of America can also compromise in order to end once and for all this world problem.